Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people are going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the whole wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. It's 10:30 Eastern time on the Eastern Coast, and Garrett's 9:30. So he got to sleep in a little bit today, but we're glad to be live streaming to you on Rumble. Rumble.com/AmRadPod is where you always find us now. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, same time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Today, we're going to be talking about hating the game. There's that old 90s saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. We're going to be digging into some of their examples of our elected officials and some of them who are just appointed officials and how they all seem to talk out of both sides of their mouth. We're going to talk about Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, once rivals, all talking about unity now. And Joni Ernst, who likes to spike the incoming Trump administration, but then pretends to be some sort of small government stalwart. Eric Adams is slipping his decisions on migration. Mike Johnson, he just can't decide if Ukraine is good or bad. Just depends on whatever the base is telling him to say. And then some talk about the real dyed-in-the-wool communists who are on our Supreme Court. All of that is what we're going to get to today on this Saturday, December 7th. Want to recognize, before we get to any of that, it's Pearl Harbor Day. 83 years since December 7th, 1941. And we are just take a moment, realize that that was an actual thing that happened in this country, that we were involved in a global war. So for all the talk about conflict and how bad times are, those were the greatest generation to actually face down real, true global tyranny. So if you are, take a moment today, think through that, and remember that there's still some vets out there. So if you happen to see one, make sure that you give them a pat on the back and say thanks, regardless of whether or not they were a World War II vet. So I'm going to do my part today, and I'm going to thank my vet, my buddy, Garrett O'Boyle at GOB Actuals, where you can find him. Going solo, according to him today. He's on daddy daycare plus American Radicals duty. So if you need to step away, don't worry, I can filibuster. But thank you for being a vet, and glad to have you here on a Saturday and ready to get at it and start dunking on some of the people, both Republican and Democrat.
Don't thank me, Steve. Thank my recruiter, as I am wont to say. But no, I appreciate it. And kudos for representing the Pearl Harbor Day, because, well, they called it the greatest generation for a reason. And I think even if you watch something like Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan, you can see some of the reasons as to why. I think even as a veteran, a GWAT guy, Afghanistan and Iraq, it wasn't like D-Day, man. It wasn't like Pearl Harbor. Those guys have a lot of grit, and if it wasn't for them, I don't know, I'm pretty sure we'd be speaking Nazi right now. So I'm glad we aren't. But I think I might have mentioned this on the show once before, like Memorial Day or something. But I went to this. It was like a World War. It was a paratrooper reunion type thing, And oddly enough, there's this historian who was real involved with setting it up and getting it all together. And he was embedded with us in Iraq for like a month because he's real big into 101st Airborne, and he was embedded with us because the unit I was in, and even all the way down to the company that I was in, was the original Easy Company from the 2nd Battalion of the 506th Infantry Regiment. And so he spent some time with us. I didn't really talk to him or get to know him much then when he was with us. I just see him around here and there, and I thought this guy's got some stones, to come over to Afghanistan. He didn't carry a weapon or anything. He's just kind of like in a journalistic role, just to document what that deployment was like and kind of trace the lineage from Easy Company, Band of Brothers, that story, to modern day. But so I get out of the Army and I'm back in Wisconsin. This is probably 2011. No, had to be at least 2012. 2012, I think it was the summer of 2012, my very first summer out of the service. And I'm friends with my history teacher from high school on Facebook at the time. And I talked to him not too long ago too, but he messages me and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to this thing. I would really like you to come." I was like, "Hey man, I just got out of the Army and I don't really have money right now. We just bought a house. We just got married not that long ago. And all these things." He's like, "I'll send you $150 for gas and I'll pay for your hotel." I was like, "All right." So Heidi and I went, and I got to meet some of these World War II paratroopers. I think all of them are dead, or at least all the ones I met are dead, maybe aside from one of them. But I remember talking to this one guy, and you can look his name up, George Pee Wee Herman. Tiny. I mean, I'm kind of big, as you know. You've seen me in person, but this dude was super small, which hence the nickname Pee Wee. But we were talking at the end of the first night, and he was like praising our generation, and I was like, "Dude, we are nothing compared to what you guys did." And he was like, "Well, we at least got to fight uh, a uniformed enemy. You guys don't get to do that." And I'm thinking in my head, just casualty wise, the GWAT was very different than World War II. But anyway, sorry for that long aside. I'll stop now. But it's also, I guess, hopefully kind of cool for the people to hear some of that background, because we don't really get into anything other than our FBI and police background, and even that we just hint at a little bit.
Well, let's talk about people who definitely would not have stormed the beaches of Normandy. And let's start with the guy
Richard Dick Levine.
You were so kind as to create the thumbnail with Mitt Romney on there, and him eating his favorite meat, hot dogs. So that's what that's a reference to for those who are kind of scratching their head at that.
Yes.
But Mitt Romney is retiring from the Senate. He's retiring from politics. He's stepping away. 77 years old. He didn't make it to octogenarian, but just close enough. But I thought it was interesting because of what he discussed. They gave him, he's a freshman senator, but they still gave him the floor to give his farewell address because he's got such clout. And I thought it was worth noting because he points out something that is completely 100% wrong. And that is that the quote is, "Americans have always been fundamentally good." I think that's an assumption in humankind that is antithetical to our Judeo-Christian worldview.
Yeah.
But Romney said that as his time in office comes to an end, he hopes to be a voice of unity and virtue, saying that it's only if the American people merit his benevolence that God will continue to bless America. So a lot of platitudes that are coming from the 2012 Republican nominee for president. But I contrast that with, here he is sort of trying to come together and speak in this grandiose language. But really when he was put to a decision, to put any sort of pressure on him to take a stand in something that was actually diametrically opposed to the view that he has that Americans are really good and we just have to bond together, he saw fit to bend the knee. And that's why I wanted to connect it to the other Mitt Romney story that I had, which this is him wearing his N95 mask at the Black Lives Matter riot march, where he took a knee and did it in solidarity, and just talking about a guy who's purports to be a leader of stalwart character, and Americans are really good at their heart, but I'm going to hold common cause with the communists on this one. So spare me your tears here, Mitt. I'm sure you were tearing up as you're getting ready to give over power in some regard. But it really just grinds my gears when these guys talk about unity when it's convenient for them to just sort of seem like they're above the fray, but in no way or shape or form are they like that at all, because they get involved in these campaigns with each other and they call each other the worst things, and then afterwards they pretend to shake hands and come together. But your thoughts on Mitt Romney? You can go anywhere with that.
Yeah, these he talks about unity, and I'm going to take a knee in solidarity. I'm going to wear my mask. I'm all for unity, Steve. That's what I would prefer. I would prefer that we love one another. We care for each other, but you know what? Not at the cost of the truth. And especially this kneeling in solidarity with the communists over George Floyd. You don't do it when the truth is sacrificed for it, because guess what, Mitt? It wasn't 7 minutes and 46 seconds, or as the current vice president said, 9 minutes and 23 seconds. They don't even get the facts right. When in actuality, the fact was the police in the George Floyd case called for EMS within 36 seconds of him being on the ground, not knowing that he was ingesting fentanyl and other type of pills that he had in the car, not knowing that he was lying to them left and right. But of course, he doesn't know that. He's Mitt freaking Romney and has been so detached from reality and so detached from law enforcement or what the real world is like. Any cop can watch that body cam footage and be like, yeah, I've dealt with guys like that before. And here, oh no, we're going to kneel in solidarity with them. For what? Because a criminal ingested a bunch of fentanyl and then the government lied about the actual facts of the case to include Minnesota government officials, including in the police department, who lied during the trial. And now you've got these officers who are serving prison sentences. But we're gonna stand or kneel in solidarity with the communists and the Marxists over this. Get the GTFO H.
How about just the cognitive dissonance to say something like Americans are really good, but why won't you unify? Well, if you were good, I guess you would have unity, right, Mitt? You just didn't come to that conclusion.
Right.
You didn't do any sort of thinking through these issues. You're just throwing out blank platitudes, and you just happen to have a good head of hair, and you came from political royalty because your dad was in government before, and then lived an entire life on the government teat. And on top of that, I contrast him with his former rival for office, one of the most evil, vile, vicious Marxists to ever be in power in the United States government, and that's Barack Obama.
Barack Hussein Obama.
Yes. And he came forward, and again, President Pot calling kettle. He talks about, quote, it's about recognizing that in a democracy, we're not a democracy. In a democracy, power comes from forging alliances and building coalitions. Again, sort of a reference to unity. Obama said that there are still lines that can't be crossed, such as when the other side uses the judiciary or criminal justice system to go after opponents. I agree with that sentiment. Unfortunately, it's his former vice president who's going after and using the criminal justice system to target their political enemies. This guy, the gall, the unmitigated gall on that dude, his entire political life is a national figure, is a farce.
Yes.
But so is Mitt Romney's.
Right.
Talking out of both sides of their mouth, always and forever. I mean, you have Barack Obama who got elected on hope and change, right? And you know, like, after 4 years of him, we hoped we had some change in our pockets.
Yeah.
And because was getting obliterated after the Obamacare, and there was a lot of displeasure. I mean, he talked to the president of Russia and said, "Give me flexibility," right? That was on a hot mic before the 2012 election. Also before the 2012 was Benghazi, right? And lied to your faces and said it was a YouTube video from an area of the world where, I mean, you'd know better than me. I don't know if you ever were in Libya, but it seems to me that maybe having the streaming services on your phone for YouTube in Libya, where they don't have two sticks to rub together, is kind of patently laughable. And so he built a new coalition, and he said, essentially, if you're white, then you're bad. And we're just going to outvote you that way. We're going to swamp you. We're going to racialize the electoral process. We were at a place in this country before Barack Obama's first election that we had as closest that we'd ever had to racial harmony. That's one of the main reasons he was elected. It wasn't that getting him across the line was we need this to happen in order to achieve racial harmony. It was only possible because we were close to it.
Right.
And it's
If we weren't, there would have been millions of white people who didn't vote for him, but they did because and I would say this is true even today, for the majority of people, race really is not that big of an issue. And oh, I know, Steve, I know I'm a racist now. I'm a racist, but maybe I get
coded language. It's a dog whistle.
maybe I get a get out of jail free card because I have some Middle Eastern heritage myself. So am I not a racist
No,
now?
you're like Thomas Sowell. You're the
Yes,
brown face of white supremacy.
oh, or like Cash Patel, right? God forbid the FBI hire a first generation Indian American, whose parents or I guess would he be second generation? I don't know. He's
First
the
generation
who was
American.
born here. Yeah, so yeah, first generation. But oh no,
Side
no,
note,
no.
my wife's Ukrainian, so I can say that about my kids, that they're
There you
first
go.
generation American.
First gen. But the DEI office at the FBI is threatening to quit. Please do. Please do, by the way. Pack your crap, because whether you quit or you get fired, you're leaving one way or the other. But Obama. Oh, there's so much here. Oh, and actually one last piece on Mitt. You know the voice he does? I'm Mitt Romney. That's the fakest politician voice around. Yet the guy has gotten elected over and over and over. And I don't know. I don't remember how close it was when he ran for president, but the dude ran for president. So I really want to know what Americans have seen in him over the years. To me, it's just a disgusting, rich politician, and I don't want anything to do with any of that. Which is weird because you could say, well, Donald Trump is a disgusting, rich politician at this point because he's been in the politics game for so long. But I view Donald Trump so very differently than I do Mitt Romney. I'm not sure what all the differences are there. At least one way, Donald Trump does seem genuine when he speaks.
I think authenticity is
Yeah,
something that's
and
immutable, right?
yes.
And that comes across in people that you don't even agree with, right? I think that like a Fetterman is pretty authentic. I mean, there's a little bit of a shtick where he wears the hoodie,
Yeah.
but when he speaks about issues and has knowledge of things that are actually pertinent in small town Pennsylvania, I think
Mhm.
that's kind of authentic. I think RFK comes off at least as relatively authentic. He seems comfortable in his own skin.
Right.
Again, they play it up, they ham it up. I mean, taking videos of yourself, picking up snakes and things like that. I don't think he's doing that on his day-to-day basis. But I can't imagine Mitt Romney ever trying to pick up a snake, which is
No.
why you have him creating a video about hot dogs being his
dogs.
favorite meat. Or
Yeah.
Barack Obama, who tried to paint himself as some sort of athlete. Do you remember he went out on the basketball court and I think he went like 1 for 25,
Well,
and
yeah,
they were trying
'cause
to say
he's
like, "Oh, he's got game."
I'm just like you, my brother. And no, you're not, dude. You're not, and that's okay. That's okay for you to not be like the caricature of what you think. I think of that. The black guy, the black president, has this
He plays
caricature
basketball.
idea of what black people are. Like, who's the racist here, Barry? But also language, Steve. You said it right when you first started talking about it, or about Barack, democracy, and you said, "Well, we're not." That's the language again. We beat that horse here all the time too. Language matters. He's doing that intentionally. People do that type of thing intentionally, especially someone like Barack Obama, who is very well spoken. I think he's actually a relatively strong orator as well, which is why they're marching him out to these events. Because and I don't know how true this is, but they're probably clinging to Barry like the right clings to Trump, and they think well, we still got Barack Obama. Like, yes, he's served his 8 years, but he's still one of us, and we can march him out, and he can help us rebrand the Democrat Party. I think they're already starting that, and I think that's why we're seeing him a lot more. But I saw this clip of I don't know what the summit was that he was at where he's saying this stuff, and it's the most obvious gaslighting to anybody who's been paying attention for the last when did Trump first start to run? 2015?
2015 is when he came down the escalator.
So 9 years, almost 10. We're almost to that 10th into the 10th year.
Season 10 is going to be lit.
Dude, that's crazy that it's been that long, but it started then. The lifelong Democrat turned Republican who's now running for president has been the main target, and then by proxy anybody who leans to that side. is targeted. What did I see you on recently? Benny Johnson, I think, or no, maybe it was Glenn Beck. I don't know. I saw some clip of you recently from this week where you were talking about the 90-year-old concentration camp survivor who protested outside an abortion clinic, jailed. And you had a couple other examples. And we talked about it just the other day. All these various examples of this lawfare. So no, Barack, don't tell me that it's the Republicans who are weaponizing the justice system. It has been weaponized by Democrats. Oh, the other piece of this too is it's easy to say, well, Joe Biden was in power for 4 years, Barack was in power for 8, but you had Trump in the middle there. But it was weaponized against Trump the first time. I'm sure they're fighting to weaponize it against him still currently and into the future, because it doesn't really matter the party that is quote unquote in charge when the bureaucracy, which is really in charge, are the ones who are going after a guy like Donald Trump or FBI agents like you and I or grandmas, because it's the bureaucracy from the inside out that has been corrupted with this Marxism bent.
I want to give a healthy portion to our next person, the Joni Ernst, who's kind of come up a lot more recently, and this week particularly. I've got some nice videos for her. And she was my senator for 7 years, my garbage senator. But before I do that, we have not thanked a sponsor in a while, and I think that we should probably go to our OG sponsor, which is the True Earth Pharmacy. Because I actually had a conversation with Claude, the mad scientist over there yesterday. And he said, you folks are still ordering it despite my dereliction in duty of pointing out that everyone needs to go to trueearth.co, trueearth.co, the True Earth Pharmacy. You can get the fertilizers that they have and the personal supplements. If you use the promo code AMRAD24, AMRAD24, AMRAD24. See, I said it 3 times. That way you'll remember. It's the final stretch here of 2024. We're all getting healthy. Look at what they got. Turmeric and lion's manes and the mushroom supplements. They even have the cannabis. And they also have the fertilizers. He was talking to me about how he just helped a farmer in the state of Georgia go from one of the least productive blueberry farmers to the top overall production, doubled his production with the fertilizers there, and soon to be coming out with an energy drink actually that's based on blueberry extract. So let's make America healthy again with some True Earth Pharmacy. trueearth.co. AMRAD24 is the code. 10% off, guys. Make sure you take advantage of it as we're finishing out the stretch here in 2024.
This is our little piece of making America healthy again. I guess you've got a little bit of the rasp left from your seasonal allergies that strike you. Not that you need your voice these days, Steve, to do all these media hits and the AMRAD podcast, but hey, it's also cool to sound like RFK.
There was something providential about it coming to just enough the day that they needed me for 10 media hits, which was on Monday. Let's get to Joni Ernst, and let's start with the good and then just devolve into the bad and the really ugly, right? And even the good is completely fake. Hate the game, not the player. Mm-hmm. She's a player in this, and she saw where there's an appetite and sees where things are popular as an opportunity to get on social media and get attention for myself, which is the next story. This is coming from New York Post. The top Doge, Elon Musk, like the top dog. Get it? So House Speaker balk at the Senate report showing 6% of federal workers show up in person. So no problem with them pointing out how absurd this is.
Yes.
Right? It's 6% of federal workforce report in person, full-time basis. The FBI, we said this week, even put out further guidance. People could work from home. But if you go down to where Elon Musk was pointing out. So, quote from Elon Musk: if you exclude security guards and maintenance personnel, the number of government workers who show up in person and do 40 hours of work a week is closer to 1%. Dude. Almost no one. Now, all of this, how is it connected to the junior senator from Iowa? Well, her office was the one that generated this study. So she's trying to get her hooks into the Doge, which is enormously popular with the base, particularly with the social media base, because Elon Musk is this big figure and fixture. It's good to highlight these things. She does that on the tail of talking about how she wants to cut $2 trillion of spending from the budget over 10 years. Don't pay attention to the second part of that sentence, by the way. right? So she's setting herself up. She wants to look good. She wants to look like a conservative. She is in cycle now. 2026 is going to be her third run for Senate if she wants to do that. If she doesn't get what she really wants, and that'll take us to our next story, which is why Joni Ernst is particularly critical of Pete Hegseth. Joni Ernst, who voted for Lloyd Austin to be the Secretary of Defense, by the way. Republican senator giving Hegseth a headache. That's a little bit more catchy title. So Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa is actively lobbying against military veteran Fox host Pete Hegseth's nomination to head the Department of Defense. Quote, I think for a number of our senators, i.e. me, they want to make sure that any allegations have been cleared, and that's why we have to have a very thorough vetting process. Well, all the allegations have been cleared, right? The sexual misconduct, the drug allegation, or the drunk allegations. There'll be something else. Now they're already going after his Bronze Stars.
Oh, you got to be kidding me! I didn't see that one yet.
His 2 Bronze Stars. He was an officer, so they're probably not legit. They just hand those
Yeah.
out like candy.
They do, and they do.
So
I
if
can
you
clear
got
that.
one, that means you did your job,
Yeah,
right?
yes. It's so I think he was deployed twice. So yes, 2 Bronze Stars checks out because at the end of a tour of duty, the way and look, I will be the first to say that the military award system is broken. It didn't used to be as broken. Think back to what we were talking about in the beginning of the show about World War II. I don't think it was broken then, or at least as broken, because they didn't just say, "Oh, you're this rank, so you get this award." Well, that's what happens now, or at least it did 10, 12, 14 years ago when I was in. When you got back from Iraq, you would get a end of tour award. And if you were an E1 to an E4, it was, I don't know, Army Commendation Medal or Army Achievement Medal, I think. And then if you were whatever, E5, it was E6, I forget what it was. But the officer, the platoon leader, would get a Bronze Star. And I think the platoon sergeant would get a Bronze Star as well. And it didn't have a V device or anything like that because those still were given more appropriately. I think we had a guy, I think he was a corporal, so that would be an E4. I think he got a Bronze Star with V when I was in Afghanistan for some firefight his platoon got in on some mountainside where they took a guy got shot in the throat and they had to medevac, and he got a Bronze Star with V. So that's really all you need to know is the Bronze Star distinguished with the V device or not? And if it's not, well, then Pete just did his job, and good for him for getting those Bronze Stars. I can't believe they're coming after him for that. That's absurd.
Well, Ernst has been floated as a potential replacement for Pete Hegseth because she comes from the military as well. I wonder how many Bronze Stars she has. Thanks for mentioning that in the chat, guys. Lemon Singer did that,
Yeah.
so I'll give him some attribution on that. That's a fair point, right? And I think that's also a fair point if she really wants to take up that mantle, or she's just doing the bidding of the military-industrial complex, which are major donors to Joni Ernst. She maybe has ambitions on Secretary of Defense. And if she were to attain that high mark, then she could argue for the following point, which I have a nice video for us on, Garrett.
And this is an idea that you support, and you have supported for some time. What do you say to your Republican colleagues who say not only should women not register for the draft, they should not be in combat?
Well, I would say, one, that women are perfectly capable of contributing in combat, whether it's combat arms or someone like me that was supporting combat operations.
And this is an idea.
Sorry for the cycle. So she's not hardcore against drafting women and endeavors to become perhaps the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I mentioned Mitt Romney's voice. Joni Ernst has that voice too.
That
Has
nasally, fake, phony voice where they are so inauthentic.
So inauthentic. What's wrong with Iowans, Steve? This is what I've been wondering this week. I don't know if you saw. I wasn't doing 10 media hits. I was in a Twitter battle trying to get noticed about wanting to move to Iowa and replace Joni Ernst because I forget how it, you know how it works. It comes across your feed, and I was like, no, this chick, she's not. This is not okay. And I think I tweeted something about her military service. And from there, it kind of spiraled. And there's a handful of people who just keep retweeting, GOB actual for Iowa and all this kinds of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, maybe I do that, because somebody like her should not be representing anybody. She does not represent the interests of America. And then she will get on here with these platitudes about women in combat. I don't remember if I told this story ever, but we had, I forget what her MOS was, but it was something to do with signals intelligence. And she was a staff sergeant. She was one of three, I think one of three. Yeah, one of three women on our little base, Fob Tillman, in Afghanistan. The other two were cooks. But this staff sergeant was always talking crap about how she could do whatever we could do and all this stuff. And in her little unit, there were two. I think it was three people total. The other two soldiers were men. And so eventually, months into our deployment, we're like, okay, you're coming with then, because we're going on. I forget how. I think it was like a 25-mile round trip movement on foot, and we go out to this little police station that we helped build and set up. And she came with, or I think that's where we were headed. I don't remember all the details exactly, but I kid you not, Steve, I kid you not, that she was crying. She was crying during our movement because it was so difficult for her. And she's carrying, we had like a 3-day pack, which was not much, because you got a little bit of food, a little bit of snivel gear, a little bit of ammo, extra battery for your radio, not super heavy. And she's crying. And so we end up divvying up her gear. She wants to take off her vest and her helmet, and our platoon leader's like, well, you can't take that off. And she could barely stand. And then to her credit, when we got back, she did say, I was way wrong and I'm never going out again. And I'm not saying that would be the case. Oh, you're muted. But I'm not saying that would be the case for every woman, but it's not smart. It's not smart to embed, because of our nature, because men and women have a different nature, and men have a natural instinct to protect women. Men also have a different kind of natural instinct to pursue women. And that is not good in a combat setting either. And for those reasons alone, women shouldn't be. Not to mention, like we've talked about here, how women are the most important asset to us in society, and we should protect that.
I think it's an important point you're making about people when they're being authentic. Authentic men, authentic women, we're very different in how we're made up. There's a reason that you have broader shoulders and more muscle mass. You're able to carry that kit. Joni Ernst probably needs to experience that, and maybe it change your perspective. But then I go back to how inauthentic people like Barack Obama and Mitt Romney and Joni Ernst are. And I can't help but notice that there's an enormous amount of consistency with the way they speak, even though they purport to represent diametrically opposing views, right? So to round out this coverage of Joni Ernst, I have another video, and let's hear what she talks about. And I'm sure Mitt Romney and Barack Obama would probably share her sentiment.
Today, many people across the United States are honoring the life of George Floyd. And so I would just encourage everybody to take pause and really reflect upon the loss of his life and recognize that it was taken way too soon. And it is very unfortunate that his death was the catalyst for talks that needed to happen a very long time ago. So I think it is a great time for us to reflect upon the life and the loss of George Floyd and understand the significance of moving forward and having really positive, encouraging talks about what it is to be a person of color across the United States.
Thank you very much.
Steve, you're trying to get me to move to Iowa, aren't you?
I think so. Who cares if he's a career criminal who is going through excited delirium, provably? Look, jump on that. Go march in the parade if you're Mitt Romney. Eat the hot dog on Hot Dog Day, or come out and make this public address and talk about how. I love how the politicians love to talk about how we need to have a conversation. Really, we don't want to do anything. We got elected to be something.
Yeah, we just want to talk about it. Just talk about it, Steve. Or like Pelosi. Remember this when they wore the
kente cloths and took a knee?
Yes, took a knee in solidarity. And dude, the George Floyd stuff. I know we talked about it with Mitt. Now we're talking about it with Joni. These people, believe them when they tell you who they are. They do not have your best interest in mind. They do not care about the truth. They just care about the sparkling object in the corner. Because here we are again. She could not be more wrong about what happened with George Floyd. We've talked about it before. I said it earlier. Don't believe the lies about the 7 minutes and whatever, or the 9 minutes, and then the body cam doesn't get released forever. Go watch The Fall of Minneapolis. Somehow it still exists on YouTube. I just checked when I saw this clip of Joni Ernst earlier this week. It's still there. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It will drastically change your mind about what happened there, unless your mind has already been changed. Because for me, when this happened, I remember trying to look at it critically through a law enforcement perspective, through a FBI defensive tactics instructor perspective, through a FBI SWAT agent perspective, through a former police officer perspective. And I thought, man, this is a bad look. This is not good. I don't think this is going to go their way. I think they probably did take this too far. Well, then you learn the broader picture, and you're like, oh yeah, I've dealt with this guy before, or a guy just like this. I bet most cops have, especially in a metro type area. And when you see the whole thing and how it's pieced together, I think her name's Liz Cronin, who took the spearhead for that documentary. It's a fantastic, and it's astounding as well. But now you have here another lying politician, Joni Ernst, and I forget what it's called, but the political, like the constitutional score that these politicians get, she's sitting at like 60%. And it's like, get out. That's not what Iowans want. I look at Iowa and I look at their governor, Kim Reynolds. She's one of the best, I think, out there. But then you got people voting Joni Ernst in, and this is a broader issue when it comes to the American populace. You got to pay attention. And if you're listening to this show, I mean, if you found us in the small corner of the internet that we exist in, you are. So I guess I'm not even talking to you, our listeners, but people need to pay attention, and they don't, because somebody like Joni Ernst should have been primaried a long time ago. It shouldn't have taken the Streisand effect, as I tweeted yesterday, I think, about this, because you got George Floyd, you got the little bit we talked about with her military career, or what she thinks about women in quote unquote combat roles. You got her talking about transgenders and what she thinks there, as far as their inclusion into the military. And guess what, people? I want to go back to the days when we had a Secretary of War, because that's what the military is for. We don't need soft titles. We don't need a soft force. We need people who are ready and capable to kill our nation's enemies. That's what the military exists for, not for the taxpayer to pay for your transgender surgery, which I'm sure Joni would be all for, because she wants transgenders in the military. And I don't know. I don't think we should have people with any sort of extreme mental illness, I guess, for lack of a better term. I think that it's a deeper spiritual issue as well. But if you're so that far gone, I don't want you carrying a gun. You shouldn't. How can you be trusted to act in a reasonable or sane manner? I don't know what's going to set you off. What if I mess up your pronouns? Are you going to shoot me then? And then what was the last? When she first started running for office, she would talk about her status as a combat veteran, and technically, Steve, she is, by how the VA defines a combat veteran. I think it's the VA or DOD, or maybe both. But they define a combat veteran as someone who deployed to a combat zone, and someone who received combat pay or hazardous duty pay. And so she did, because guess what? When you deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan, you automatically get that stuff. Everybody does. Whether you're a FOBIT just sitting on the base, and doing whatever. And look, we need those people too. We do. We need cooks, and we need mechanics, and I don't know, people who load up C-130s and Chinooks full of food and ammo and water to get sent out. Which I think that's similar to what she was. She was a supply officer or something along those lines, where she was helping run supply chains. But she was a battalion commander, and I looked into this week. This is why I know so much about it, because it frustrated the hell out of me as someone who, as you can see back there, maybe you can see it a little bit, my CIB hanging up in that plaque or whatever that's called back there, which a CIB is a combat infantryman's badge. Only infantrymen get that, and only infantrymen who face combat with our nation's enemies get that. There's a similar award for people who aren't in the infantry in the Army. It's called the Combat Action Badge. Joni Ernst doesn't have that. And I'm not saying combat is, well, it is the great divider in a lot of ways, but I'm not saying it's the only thing that matters when you deploy, because we do need support. But then for her to come back and use as a huge pillar of her campaign, and I think she still leans into it pretty heavy, her status as a combat veteran. Most people don't understand what that means. And to veterans who actually did the damn thing, it matters. And so when you come in, you act like you're this combat veteran, which, okay, yeah, by definition you are, but you're being deceptive in how you use it, because no one. So as a battalion commander, she wrote her unit's history. The worst thing that happened to them on their deployment was some young Iraqi males on the way back from a convoy that they did, which I don't think she was even on because of how she wrote it. Some Iraqi males stepped in between some of the vehicles, and then they lay down in the road, and then at the last second, because the vehicles were moving way slower, the guys rolled out of the way. That was the most intense incident in their entire deployment.
Sounds like Mitt Romney's parade that he was marching in. They probably would have done something like that.
Yes. So there's my rant on Joni Ernst.
I mean, Iowa's congressional delegation is complete garbage. You got Chuck Grassley, age 91. He'll be in cycle in 4 years, and he says he's running again.
No way. When's he going to let his son or nephew or whatever
grandson? His grandson's the Speaker of the House, and not a fan of Kim Reynolds. So she's said flat out, if Chuck steps aside, you're not getting that spot. That's what Chuck Grassley wants. He wants it to be his family's seat, not the Iowans' seat, his family's seat.
Okay, that's just as despotic and disgusting as anything the left does. You don't get to hold on to the reins of power forever, Chuck. That's not how it's supposed to work here. That's despicable.
Well, he wants his progeny to be something, not necessarily do something. They're all empty vessels. And let's go to the guy who's third in line, right? If anything happens to the human Roomba and Kamalamanism, that's Mike Johnson's got to step into the breach. And he says he's very excited about Elon Musk getting involved with the Doge to bring down those costs. Mike, you're the Speaker of the House, and you've signed off on all of this. And one of the biggest expenditures we've had has been the United States involvement with Ukraine. But Mike Johnson, biblical worldview, is saying that that's coming to an end here, don't you know? So this comes from the Kyiv Independent, because I go globally for my news sources, Garrett. House Speaker rejects Biden's request for additional $24 billion in Ukraine aid. So House Speaker Mike Johnson said on December 4th that he will not put to a vote this request. Roughly $16 billion of it was going to be used to restock the U.S.'s arsenals because we've completely depleted our own. So
how's that for, that's great. That's just great.
It's good for Joni Ernst donors.
Yeah. Good grief.
While the remaining $8 billion would go to the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, USAI. How do you not like anything that starts with USA, after all?
Yes.
But this is
must be a communist if you don't, because I don't know, patriotism or something.
This is an interesting evolution for the Speaker of the House. Third in line, after all, right? And that's also me ripping off the title for the next and connecting piece. The evolution of Mike Johnson on Ukraine comes from the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness.
My favorite.
With the House. So this comes, this is a couple months old, this piece, but the House passed a $40 billion emergency funding bill for Ukraine in May of 2022. That was the first support that our country sent over there. And Mike Johnson was one of the 57 Republicans who opposed it. He wasn't the Speaker at the time. He was just a backbencher. Actually was at our hearing shortly thereafter. Now, just 6 months after his unlikely elevation to the Speaker of the House, Johnson has pushed through a $60 billion effort. So 50% increase in that. It took it up that point to $100 billion that we had sent over to Ukraine. We sent double that at this point. The far right is fiercely against the Ukraine aid. 112 Republicans, over half of the conference, opposed it. So Johnson had to rely on unanimous Democrat backing. And here's his quote. "Look, history judges us for what we do," said Johnson, holding back tears with a quivering lip.
Oh, my goodness.
Quote, "I could make a selfless decision and do something that's different, but I'm doing here what I believe to be the right thing. And that's to make Joni Ernst donors happy."
Yeah. Okay, Mike. Do you really think that that's the right thing?
Hey
This is,
man, don't hate the player, hate the
dude.
game.
Okay, I do. I hate both. Can I hate both? Is that all right?
Yes,
Can I
not mutually
challenge?
explosive. It's not if or, it's and also.
Yeah. Can I challenge Mike Johnson to a duel? It doesn't even have to be with guns. It could just be fisticuffs. Can we do
You should
that
do
still?
that slap competition thing.
Oh yeah. Wow. I think Mike Johnson, for me, let us know in the chat what you guys think about this, because maybe I am kind of a dullard or didn't pay enough attention, or maybe I'm too selfish. I'm not quite sure which is true. Maybe all those things are true. I don't know. When I first got suspended, within a couple days, they sent one of their strongly worded letters, and woe is me back then, because I thought, oh yeah, this is gonna help. Well, it didn't help. But Jim Jordan, Darrell Issa, and Mike Johnson signed off on this letter, and it was about retaliation against whistleblowers. And Steve, you and I, it was a horse apiece. Could have been about either of us, or maybe it was about both, because we're not named in it. I do know though, because Jordan's staff sent me an email and said, hey, we sent this letter today. Here's a copy of it. And I remember back then thinking, all right, Jim Jordan, Darrell Issa, and Mike Johnson. Those are dudes that I'm going to remember because they did this for me, quote unquote. And fast forward our hearing, he becomes speaker, and it was when he became speaker when I realized what a freaking snake that dude is. And for someone who claims to have a biblical worldview, I think it hits home even harder, because, and look, I'll give you grace when grace is needed, because we must. I forget the verse, but there's a verse that just literally says, love covers a multitude of sins. Amen. Absolutely does. No marriage would work if that wasn't the case. No friendship would work if that wasn't the case. But it's difficult, difficult for me when I see a guy like Mike Johnson to claim to have this biblical worldview and to claim America first, and then to do this and say, I did what I thought was the right thing. Sending more billions of dollars to Ukraine, you think is the right thing? Screw you, dude.
KD556 says that he doesn't deserve the last name Johnson. Well played. I'm wondering if 556 could be a reference to a lot of the arsenal that we sent over to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so as long as Mike Johnson is reversing course, let's take it off the federal space. This is local, but national. This is the mayor of New York, Eric Adams. We're equal opportunists here. We like to really go hard against the guys that purport to represent us, but let's go after Eric Adams, because he's now reversed his position on illegal aliens. This comes from National Review. New York City mayor says he'll work with Trump to deport illegal immigrant criminals. Quote, cancel me. He's taking a stand here. So this is a quote from Eric Adams. Those who are here committing crimes, robberies, shooting at police officers, raping innocent people have been a harm to our country. Those are the people I am talking about. I made it clear that I'm not going to be warring with this administration. I'm going to be working with this administration. So has he had a change of heart, or is he an opportunist who his opportunity is my electoral prospects are garbage? I'm really not playing for the next election or for my lobbyists. I'm playing for the jury pool that's going to be sentencing me or deciding on my fate here when they charge me eventually for the corruption scandal. I think that's probably where he's at.
I'm going with option 2 here, Steve, because we've seen enough of Eric Adams over the last few years and how he's operated in New York. A guy like that, he's as slippery as a seal in a pocket of oil,
He's got the nicest suits and the nightlife. I mean, New York's got a brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he just drove it into the ground.
He did his part. He did his part along with Kathy Hochul or whatever, and Andrew Cuomo. Which one? Chris? Andrew, right?
Andrew Cuomo was the governor. Chris Cuomo was the one who said, don't take ivermectin because it's horse paste, until it was time for him to take ivermectin. And then he said that it's actually to defend himself against long COVID.
Sure. Okay. Another lying, slippery seal out of New York. But Mayor Adams, I mean, dude, it goes back to the title, right? It's don't hate the game. Hate the game. This is politics for you, man. It very much so looks like flip-flopping, because I'm sure we could dig up some clips of him from a year ago or 2 or 3 where
he loves talking about New York being a rainbow city.
Mm-hmm. Let him in. Come, bring him in. He may have even cited Lady Liberty's little plaque at her feet about, or is it in her hand? I forget now. Give
He
us
can't
your.
read that well. I doubt it. So let's go across the river. And again, national to local, but national. And now we'll just go to local. This is a sort of a hot button issue that came about because it's this town in Edison, New Jersey. Town council at a time banned the Constitution and the U.S. flag from display at
What?
hearings.
Oh,
So this is a follow-up story, but Edison Township made national headlines when a man was escorted by police out of a hearing for carrying a small American flag while arguing against the decorum ban. They'd already banned it at that point. Township Council President Nisith Patel apologized and claimed that the uproar was a misunderstanding. Quote, "Let me be clear, the Edison Council has never, nor will we ever, ban the American flag from our public meetings. Although this is a week after kicking a man out of that hearing for having an American flag. Hate the game, not the player." Do you think that this guy Patel, no relation to Cash, has his eye on something maybe a little bit better than the Edison Township Council?
Oh,
This is
for
going to be
sure.
bad for me. This is going to be bad. I don't want to ban the flag, and I'm going to get off this X while I can, and I'm going to wrap myself very much in that flag, even though a week ago I said it was a symbol of hate or whatever they wanted.
Mhm. This is a guy who for a moment, his true nature, his true Marxist communist nature slipped through, and we're banning that. We're banning it, man. We hate America so much, we're going to use the liberties we have in America to ban the things we hate. How about that? And I'm getting backlash. I better backpedal. I'm going to act like I love America because I'm a good Marxist, and that's what we have to do from time to time. We have to play the game and act a certain way, and yeah, I bleed red, white, and blue too, and until I bleed hammer and sickle in a few years when I move into my next position.
You brought about two terms there, hammer and sickle, yes, and true nature. So I've got 3 examples of people who are not playing the game. They don't represent our side, but at least they're being authentic in their communist ideology or anti-human ideology, whatever you want to characterize it as. Again, it's not if or, it could be and also. And let's play these 2 videos, both coming from the Supreme Court this week with the arguments over the Tennessee law that prohibits the meatball surgeries for children.
Man, these are going to be good, I'm sure.
So 2 of the Supreme Court justices, Ketanji Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor. We'll start with Ketanji Jackson. I don't say Ketanji Brown Jackson because that's her maiden name, which is her father's name, because the patriarchy always wins. But this is Ketanji Jackson.
Being drawn by the statute. That was sort of like the starting point. The question was whether it was discriminatory because it applied to both races and it wasn't, necessarily invidious or whatever. But, as I read the statute here, the case here, the court starts off by saying that Virginia is now one of 16 states which prohibit and punish marriages on the basis of racial classifications. And when you look at the structure of that law, it looks in terms of, you can't do something that is inconsistent with your own characteristics. It's sort of the same thing. So it's interesting to me that we now have this different argument, and I wonder whether Virginia could have gotten away with what they did here by just making a classification argument the way that Tennessee is in this case.
Yes, I think that's exactly right, that there is absolutely a parallel between any law that says you can't act inconsistent with a protected characteristic.
All right. So the argument that she's making is that cutting off the healthy breast tissue or testicles for a young man is equivalent to not allowing interracial marriage. And it's a nonsensical argument, but she's a true believer in violating just basic ethics at that point. And I do think it's interesting how this is a Supreme Court. It's supposed to be very Socratic. The justices are supposed to just ask a question and then elicit the responses from the argument from the opposing counsels, right? But she's just sitting up there like it's a podcast, like it's the American Radicals podcast, and just, hey, let me provide you what I want you to say. It's like me asking a very leading question to Garrett, like, hey, Garrett, what is the funniest thing that you ever hear about when I talk about the Washington Post?
Their byline.
It's to that level, right?
Yeah.
But she's going to say whatever she has to say to push forward that ideology because she wants that particular outcome. So hate the game, not the player. And similarly, Sonia Sotomayor, who is again in a running battle with Ketanji Jackson for who is dumber.
Dude,
She
seriously.
was comparing the risks associated with injecting hormones into children, testosterone into young girls, with taking aspirin. So let's give that a play.
Cannot eliminate the risk of detransitioners. So it becomes a pure exercise of weighing benefits versus risk. And the question of how many minors have to have their bodies irreparably harmed for unproven benefits is one that is best left.
I'm sorry, counselor. Every medical treatment has a risk. Even taking aspirin.
Dude. Seriously? This is where we're at? This is where we're at.
The highest court on the land, and they are dyed-in-the-wool communists. They're willing to harm kids gleefully. It makes them happy to hurt you. They want to harm children.
I'll never understand that other than they're just pawns of Satan. But I also, on one hand, I struggle more with Sotomayor because she's been there. She's been there a while. She's been on the court for a while. I don't know how long. We've talked about it before. McNeely versus Missouri, 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. I love this case because it's similar. So here she's saying injectable hormones are no different than aspirin. In McNeely, she's talking about how sticking a needle in someone's body was such an intrusion that they had to get a warrant. And I actually agree with that. I think that is a reasonable stance. Whether or not I have the requisite probable cause to arrest you for drunk driving, this is where the McNeely case came from, is a drunk driving case. Goes all the way to Supreme Court because they forcibly drew the guy's blood because he didn't consent to it. And at the end of the case, Supreme Court ruled that the government has to get a warrant if they're going to do something as intrusive as sticking a needle in somebody's body. But think of this, and we were when we talked about this last time, and I don't know how long ago it was, it's been a while. We were talking about it in relation to COVID and how the government wanted to force you essentially to inject something into your body, an unknown substance, and a relatively untested substance. Well, compare that to hormones getting injected into, female hormones getting injected into a male, or male hormone, vice versa. There's empirical data that is not safe, to the point where even the United Kingdom, who has gone off that deep end with their woke ideology and the way they're ruling on freedom of speech and all sorts of stuff, but they're peeling back some of this progression with the trans stuff because they're realizing how dangerous it is. We're not quite there yet in America. And now you have this Supreme Court justice who said in one case 10, 12 years ago that it was such an intrusion to stick a needle into your body to take something out, your blood, where now, it's just like aspirin to put something in to your body. It blows my mind that you can hold those two opinions about a case regarding quote unquote medical procedures. That's what both would be considered.
Well, Sonia Sotomayor has no children, so that might be it, right?
That's part of it.
That's probably one of the driving factors. And talking about someone who does have a child, and I do think it's worth bringing this up because we're sort of in limbo. It's two stories connected. One, it's our final story, and it's about Daniel Penny. So for those who are unaware, Daniel Penny, the jury seemed hopelessly deadlocked on the top line charge, which is manslaughter. And in order to render a decision on the secondary decision, which is reckless homicide, they had to get to a verdict on the top line, right? They had to say guilty. If he's guilty, then he's guilty. It's done. If they say not guilty, then they can deliberate over the lesser charge. Well, wouldn't you know it, the Marxist communists in New York City who brought those charges to begin with, and the DA who brought those charges to begin with, and then the judge. So the DA essentially colludes with the judge to violate the law and drop the top line charge. So for everybody who was celebrating, hey, they dismissed the manslaughter charge. No, the deadlock jury was the best option for Daniel Penny. It would have been a hung jury, would have been mistrial, and most likely they don't bring the charges again. But instead, they're giving the jury the opportunity to just weigh in on the lesser charge, right? We're not going to let you do that. So it's a complete violation. I don't have the story for that, but thought it was worth explaining. The story that I do have, though, talking about children, is about Jordan Neely's father. Jordan Neely's father, who I can't help but notice has a different surname than Jordan Neely, but he's now come to the forefront. His name is Andre Zachary, and he's accusing Daniel Penny of negligence, assault, and battery, and he's suing him for his son, who was just around and mentally disturbed in the subways. I'm sure it was a son he cared greatly about. That's why the son is not named after him. But he's here to cash in, right? Don't hate the player, hate the game.
That's right. Hate the game. Dude, it's this Daniel Penny story, it's really a difficult one for me because, again, I was just talking with Heidi about this last night, and I mentioned it earlier. Our similar background. I'm sure, like me, you look at these things from a law enforcement perspective, a law enforcement worldview, if you will. Whether it's George Floyd or whatever ones come out into the stratosphere. Well, this McNeely case is one of them. And again, I look at this and I think, what's the standard? What is the standard for using force? It's reasonableness. I don't know how especially someone with the training and the background and the knowledge and the understanding of the law, the understanding of the case law, I don't know how anyone could look at this and say, this was unreasonable. This is manslaughter. Okay, we're going to drop it. We're going to drop the manslaughter, that big one. We're going to drop that one because we can come and charge it later. So we're going to have just a couple other charges. I don't know how you could charge anything for this. And then on top of it, we're going to slap on a civil suit because, and you mentioned it, his the surname is different. And the breakdown in family certainly plays a role here. I don't like that this guy was killed, but you know what I like less in an allegedly free society? Because again, in a free society, you do have to have guardrails because we have our social compact, another thing we talk about a lot. In order to have a functioning social compact, there are still going to be rules. And you can't go into a subway and start threatening people and scaring people and interfering with their freedom and expect nothing to happen. Not to mention the relatively long, probably long compared to most people, rap sheet that the guy had. And I know they'll say, well, his mental health. Well, then why was he there? Why didn't he have some sort of minder with him? And well, let's just charge the white guy. And I'm sure you know this too, Steve. The judge let one of the quote unquote witnesses just say that over and over and over. The white guy, the white guy, the white guy. That has nothing to do with it. Not in a reasonable society.
It's almost as if Barack Obama were the judge there that was completely allowing that racialization to happen. I have a palate cleanse, and we had a Rumble rant come in, Garrett. So before we get your final thoughts here, let me throw that up. It come from DL Maga. Glad to be back. Been sadly distracted lately. You guys rock. Thanks for giving us Misfits a place to hang and say hi. God bless you and all those in the chat. Well, thank you, DL Maga. And we're glad to have you as one of the Misfits here on the American Radicals podcast. Glad to have everyone here on a Saturday, especially. New time, as always, a reminder, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 10:30 Eastern time is where you get us here on Rumble. Garrett, before we get to the palate cleanse, what you got?
Yeah, I got something here. I think it really encapsulates a lot of the stories we talked about today. It's in Proverbs 12, and I'm going to start in verse 19. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but those who plan peace have joy. No ill befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. A prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims folly. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. And honestly, man, these books of wisdom, Proverbs especially, stands out. But think of all the stories, the lying lips from both sides. You got Barack Obama, you got Mitt Romney, you got Mary Adams, you got Joni Ernst. It runs the gamut, and it's unacceptable. And I really do. I'm actually grateful for 2020, what happened, because I think a lot of people woke up and are continuing to wake up, and they're starting to see more than ever before. And I include myself in this group. More than ever before, we're starting to see the truth or the lies, maybe a little bit of both. I don't recall a time when a Senator Ernst character would come out of the woodwork and it was clear or relatively clear that she's trying to subvert, and not just her, but anybody throughout the last, 20 years or so that I've been paying closer attention to national level politics and news, where so many people will come out and say, no, we got you marked. We got you marked because you're a liar and you're not good for this country. And you're trying to subvert what we voted for. You're trying to subvert Donald Trump and the mandate that we voted for. You're trying to subvert Pete Hegseth. And oh, look, we dug into you a little bit and you've been lying for a long time. And now you're marked. And I'm grateful for that, because maybe we're going to enter into an era where only more people will become that way. And only more people will recognize the deceitful, lying lips and the wickedness of people in government. And they'll root it out. We'll root it out ourselves. So that's why I bring that one up.
All right. And we do have a palate cleansing talking about people who just endeavor for power above all things. I can't think of anyone who has sought that more than the person who Donald Trump defeated to begin with. That was Hillary Rodham Clinton.
I am 38 years old. This will be the 10th presidential cycle of my lifetime. Every president in my lifetime goes into office a sociopath and then leaves a war criminal. Because they all want one thing. You know what they want? They want the ring. Ooh, they want the ring of power. They want it. They want it more than marriage, more than family, more than their kids. Look at Hillary Clinton. Look at how bad Hillary Clinton wanted to be president. Hillary Clinton wanted to be president so bad, she was willing to sit in the same office not a different office, not a replica House of Cards office, the Oval Office.
It's true.
It's
Sad,
true.
but true. All right. That's going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you again for joining us here on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. Have a great weekend. We'll be back with you Tuesday, 10:30 Eastern time. Until then, be safe and have a great weekend.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.